The Book of Numbers, fully summarized. So the book begins with God telling Moses in the tabernacle of meeting to take a census of all the 12 tribes of Israel to see how many capable men aged 25 and up that there were that were able to become warriors. And so Moses went with the heads of each tribe to number the Israelites. And then the Bible states in 24 repetitive verses how many able-bodied males there were in each tribe, when it easily could have been summed up in one. Here, I'll demonstrate. 46,500 were of Reuben, 59,300 were of Simeon, 45,650 were of Gad, 74,600 were of Judah, 54,400 were of Issachar, 57,400 were of Zebulun, 40,500 were of Ephraim, 32,200 were of Manasseh, 35,400 were of Benjamin, 62,700 were of Dan, 41,500 were of Asher, and 53,400 were of Naphtali. See, it's not that hard. In all, 603,550 were numbered, which was a lot more than I expected. Jews must breed like crazy. Their population went from 70 to over 1 million in 400 years. But the Levites were not numbered among the other 12 tribes because they were commanded to keep charge of the tabernacle and camp around it. Where's the justice for the Levites? Then in the next chapter, God states that all of the Israelites would camp in their own father's tribe. And then the chapter just kind of states all the numbers of each tribes again with no variety in sentence structure, only it states that where the tribes were supposed to be in their battle formations, and also who would be in charge of leading all the tribes. The next chapter states all the descendants of Aaron, and then God commands that the Levites were to do the work of the tabernacle and serve Aaron and his sons, and anyone who came near the tabernacle would be executed. Then God states that he changed his mind about having all the firstborns offered up to him, and he instead proclaims that all the Levites would belong to him instead. God commands Moses to take a census of the male Levites, and then the chapter lists the genealogy of the Levites and their positions of protecting the tabernacle. And in the end, 22,000 Levites were numbered. No fair, that's lower than all the other tribes. #justice for Levites. Then God again states that he changed his mind about taking all the firstborns for himself, and he instead took the Levites for himself and their livestock, and they were his. So then he told Moses to number all the firstborn males in Israel, and so Moses did so, and despite there being over 600,000 able-bodied men in Israel, there were apparently only 22,273 firstborns, because that makes sense. And then by God's command, Moses redeemed the 273 more firstborns than there were Levites by giving money in exchange for them to Aaron. Then God told Moses to take a census of the sons of Kohath, Gershon, and Merari of Levi, but only of the males aged 30 to 50. And then all of the duties for them were listed, and they were to physically carry different parts and accessories of the tabernacle of meeting, but they were required to cover them with veils and cloths, so that they did not die by touching or looking at any of the holy things. And there was once again a lot of sentence repetition. So Moses did as God commanded along with Aaron and the leaders of the congregation, and 2,750 were of the Kohathites, 2,630 were of the Gershonites, and 3,200 were of the Merarites. And in all there were 8,580 people numbered. Then the Lord told Moses to take all the unclean people in Israel, like lepers, out of there so that they would not defile the camp, which he did. And then he told Moses that if a person ever sinned against God, they had to confess and pay restitution plus 1/5 to the person that was wronged. But if there was no one to give restitution to, it was to be given to God. And also a ram of atonement was to be offered up to him by the priest. Then God told Moses the law of jealousies. If a man believed that his wife had committed adultery, then he was to bring her to the priest and offer up a grain offering of jealousy. Then the priest would make her drink bitter holy water. If the woman was innocent, the water would have no effect. But if she was guilty, the water would put a curse on her and abort that unborn bastard, and she would become weak and barren. And of course, there's no punishment given for the man she had sex with. Then the Lord told Moses what someone had to do if they wanted to commit themselves to God and take the vow of the Nazirite. The person must not drink any wine or any other strong drink, nor shave his hair, or touch a corpse, and he will be holy to the Lord. If he does do anything to break the vow, he must shave his head and make an offering to God of 2 turtle doves or pigeons for a sin offering, and a male lamb for a trespass offering, and then start all over again until his vow is fulfilled. When his vow is finished, he will present a firstborn lamb sacrifice, and then an ewe lamb sacrifice, and a ram sacrifice, and grain offerings to the Lord, unleavened, of course, because God hates yeast! And then he must shave and burn his hair, and drink wine again. Then God told Moses to tell Aaron and his sons to bless the people of Israel on behalf of the Lord. So then, after Moses had finished setting up the tabernacle, the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel each brought 6 carts and 12 oxen to Moses, who distributed them among the Levites. And then each of the tribe leaders offered up their sacrifice to the Lord over a period of 12 days. The book then goes on to list in repetitive verses what each tribe leader brought, even though they all brought the exact same thing and the same amount of it, which was silver platters, silver bowls, gold spoons, incense, oxen, bulls, rams, lambs, grain, oil, and goats. See, it's very easy to say it only in a sentence or two. What is the point of repeating it 11 times? Then Moses went into the tabernacle of meeting, where God told Moses to tell Aaron to arrange the golden lamps. Aaron did as God commanded, and then God told Moses to do a ceremonial cleansing of the Levites, to dedicate them to God in front of all of Israel. They were to be purified with water and shaved and have their clothes washed. The Levites were to be taken before the tabernacle, and the children of Israel were to lay their hands on them. Aaron was to offer the Levites up to God, and then 2 bulls were to be offered up as sacrifice, and thus the Levites would be separated from the rest of the children of Israel to the Lord. So the Levites were to do the work of the tabernacle of meeting, and were to serve Aaron and his sons forever in serving the Lord. Moses and Aaron did all that God had commanded concerning the Levites, and then God told Moses that the Levites over 50 or under 25 were not to do any work for the tabernacle. Then God commanded Moses to have Israel keep his Passover, but there were some who were made unclean by a corpse, and asked Moses if they should participate. So God told Moses that both the clean and the unclean, as well as those away from the tribes, would keep the Passover, and that any clean man who did not keep the Passover would be cut off from Israel and bear his own sin. The stranger within the land was also required to keep the Passover. Then the chapter explains that after the tabernacle was raised up, a cloud appeared over the tabernacle during the day, and fire appeared over the tabernacle at night. And when it was time for Israel to rest, the cloud did not move. But when the cloud was lifted and got off its ass to start moving, that was when it was time for Israel to journey. The Israelites obeyed the cloud, whether day or night, no matter how long they camped or traveled. Geez, no wonder they were in the desert for 40 years. They were following a freaking cloud. Anyway, then God had Moses create 2 silver trumpets to communicate with Israel and notify them if they needed to gather or if they needed to get into position for battle. And God also stated that if Israel ever needed help, Moses was to call on God's power with the trumpets, and he would save them from their enemies. Then, when the cloud rose from the tabernacle, Israel finally left the mountain of Sinai after 2 years and journeyed on, with the tabernacle being carried by the Levites. The chapter then lists the commanders of the armies of Israel. Moses then talked to his brother-in-law, Hobab, and was convinced that they would soon be in the promised land. Oh, my sweet baby, no. And promised to give land to Hobab in the promised land, and said that he would be blessed. Then Israel complained because they could only eat manna and wanted meat. So God burned some of them alive because he was ticked off. Moses calmed him down, though, with some prayers, and then complained about how only he was responsible for looking after the Israelites, and he was not able to provide for them all, and he begged God to give the Israelites meat. So God told Moses to gather 70 elders of Israel so that he could endow them with his spirit, and they would also be able to rule Israel and help Moses. However, God also said that he would make Israel eat only meat for a whole month and make them utterly sick of it. That'll show him, bunch of ingrates. Moses was doubtful that enough meat would be able to feed over 600,000 men, but God was like, I am built different. So then God sent the Spirit upon 70 elders, and then sent a wind of quail that stacked up on the ground a meter high, which was more than enough for Israel to live off. But God was annoyed that they were being gluttonous, so he struck the gluttons with a plague, killing some of them. Then Aaron and his sister Miriam criticized Moses for having a foreign wife from Ethiopia. But God appeared from the cloud above the tabernacle and slapped them down and told them that Moses was more faithful than they would ever be. Then he plagued Miriam with leprosy, and Aaron begged God to save her, so Moses interceded for him, and God told him that Miriam had to be exiled out of the camp for 7 days. So after that, Miriam was brought back in, and I'm assuming she was cured? It doesn't say. Then the Lord told Moses to send spies into the land of Canaan to scout it out. So Moses sent one leader of each of the 12 tribes to spy out the land, to bring back a report of it, to see whether the land was good, and if the people there were easy to kill. So they did as Moses commanded, and came back after 40 days of scouting. They brought fruit from it, and gave the report that the land was heavenly, flowing with milk and honey. But the people dwelling there were very powerful, and the descendants of Anak there were somehow actual giants. Then the congregation of Israel got super scared and complained that Moses was leading them to their deaths, and they wanted to return to Egypt. Moses and Aaron fell on their faces out of embarrassment, but two of the spies, Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, said that was fake news, and told the Israelites not to worry because as long as God was with them and they were faithful to him, they would be fine. So then the people tried to stone Joshua and Caleb, but the glory of the Lord appeared to the people and told Moses he has had enough with all these whiners and was about to kill every single one of them with disease because they did not trust the words of Joshua and Caleb. Moses told God to calm down and told him killing all of his followers would kind of give him a bad reputation, and he complimented the Lord by calling him merciful. Merciful. Then literally in the same sentence he talks about God punishing children for the sins of their ancestors. So God did not kill all of them, but he swore that the generation he brought out of Egypt, 20 years or older, excluding Joshua and Caleb, would never see the promised land because they were impatient, and he would make Israel wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Then God killed 10 of the spies that were sent to Canaan with the plague for making the people lose faith. Freedom of speech is overrated anyway. Then Israel tried to attack the Amalekites and Canaanites to make up for them not trusting the Lord, despite Moses telling them not to. But the Lord was no longer with them, so they were defeated. Then the Lord told Moses the correct way to offer up animal sacrifice to him, so he could get that sweet, sweet aroma of burning flesh. And then he said that Israel had to do as he told Moses when they reached the promised land, including foreigners staying in the land. Then God gave instructions for heave offerings of delicious baked goods, and then said that if a person ever sins unintentionally and does not observe the commandments, then the whole congregation would need to offer up one young bull as a sweet aroma to the Lord, as well as some other offerings. A priest is also able to do so to forgive the entire congregation of Israel for sinning. A person who sins unintentionally can also bring a young female goat to sacrifice as well, I guess. But if a person sins intentionally against God, then he will be banished from Israel. Moses then locks up a man who has been seen gathering sticks on the Sabbath, and God commanded Israel to stone him to death, so the congregation did so as he commanded. So after that nonsense, God then told Moses to put blue tassels on the garments of the people of Israel so that God's commandments would be remembered forever. Then Korah, the son of Izhar, took 250 men and rebelled against Moses and Aaron, questioning what right they had to lead Israel. Moses fell on his face again, seems like he might want to have a blood sugar issue looked at, and said that the Lord would reveal who was truly worthy to lead Israel, and then he criticized them for not being thankful that they were among the Levites, the people who had been given to God. They then complained more against Moses, saying that he had not fulfilled his promise to bring them into the promised land, and they were going to die in the wilderness. And, kind of fair point. So next day, according to Moses' challenge, each of the 250 men took up his censer and burned incense on it. Then God appeared to Israel and told Aaron and Moses to get themselves and the rest of Israel away from Korah and the tabernacle, or else he would kill them along with him. So they did so. And Moses proclaimed that if the 250 men died on his command, then God was with him. So then God opened up the earth and buried Korah and his men and their families alive, along with their possessions, and then burned them to death. Then Eleazar, son of Aaron, went to retrieve the censers because they were holy, and they served as a reminder to Israel about what happens when they disobey. Israel justifiably didn't care much how God kept slaughtering his own people all the time, so they were angry at God, and so God decided to make them even angrier, so the Lord released a plague on Israel. By the time Aaron was able to stop God by offering up atonement for them with incense, God had already killed 14,700 people. Then God thought of a plan to prove that Aaron was the one true priest of Israel by taking a rod from all of the leaders of the tribes along with Aaron's rod, and they were all to be placed in the tabernacle of meeting. Moses did as God commanded, and Aaron's long, hard rod was the only one that budded and produced ripe almonds. What? The entire congregation of Israel saw the miraculous rod after it was brought out of the tabernacle, so the children of Israel feared for their lives because they knew Aaron was super holy and not to be messed with. Then God told Aaron that he and his descendants would be the holy priests of the tabernacle, and the Levites would be their helpers, but they would not touch the tabernacle or its articles, or they would die, as would any outsider who came near the tabernacle. Then God told Aaron that he and his sons had the right to eat from any of the heave and wave offerings given to God in the holy place, and that they would eat the best wheat, oil, wine, and fruit of the land, and that all of the Levites would belong to them, but that they would have no physical inheritance. God also may have given them another instruction or two about some sacrifices as well, which were supposed to be performed forever. Then God said that the Levites would have no inheritance for themselves. For real, #justice for Levites. And they would be sustained on the tithes of Israel, which would be given in return for their work protecting and serving the tabernacle. But the Levites were still required to share everything they had with God, and give many offerings to him, because they were his people. Then God explains an important ritual where a red heifer will be slaughtered by a priest, who will have its blood sprinkled on the tabernacle and then burned. The ashes were then to be mixed with water and used for purification. Anyone who touches a corpse becomes unclean, and in order to become clean, they must wash themselves with the water, and after 7 days, the person will be clean again. But if a person does not do that, they will be banished from Israel for choosing to remain unclean. Also, there was a ritual that God instructed for cleaning tents that people had died in, involving hyssop dipped into the purification water. Then the Israelites came into the wilderness of Zin, where Miriam died and was buried. Aha! So God didn't cure her leprosy then. The congregation had no water to drink, and complained again to Moses, and said that they would have been better off in Egypt. God told Moses to use his rod to create water from a rock, so the Israelites had water to drink. Moses did the magic trick wrong, though, because God told Moses to talk to the rock rather than striking it with his staff, so Moses and Aaron were forbidden from ever seeing the promised land. Geez, that's kind of harsh. Moses is doing all this stuff for you, God, and you're punishing him over this one thing? Then Israel tried to get passage through the land of Edom. However, Edom refused to grant it to them when the messengers of Israel came to the king, even though they came in peace. And Edom threatened to get violent with Israel, so Israel went away. Israel journeyed to Mount Hor, and God told Aaron to die on a mountain and have his priesthood passed on to his son Eleazar. So Aaron died on Mount Hor, and Israel mourned him for 30 days. Then Arad, the king of the Canaanites, captured some of the Israelites, but Israel made a vow to God to utterly destroy the cities of Canaan if he helped them win. So with God's help, Israel completely destroyed the Canaanites and their cities. Then Israel complained again because they were eating nothing but manna. So God sent out flaming serpents to poison and kill a bunch of people. Moses prayed to God to spare them, and so God told him to erect a bronze statue of a serpent, and when people looked at it, they were no longer poisoned. Then Israel journeyed around for a while, sang some songs, killed King Sihon and his Amorites and Jahaz, and stole a bunch of their stuff and their land for not letting them pass through his territory. Sang a song about killing King Sihon and his Amorites. Then King Og of Bashan attacked Israel, so Israel killed him and all his people, leaving no one alive, and took his land with God's help. Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, understandably feared the Israelites who were camping in the plains of Moab, and so he sent princes to Balaam, son of Beor, who somehow had God on speed dial in order to get him to curse the Israelites so that he could defeat them. However, when the princes arrived with his request, God told Balaam that Israel was blessed and he would not curse them, even though God literally just cursed them with flaming serpents, and God told him to not go with the princes. So Balaam told the princes to go away. Balak then sent more princes to try to convince Balaam, but Balaam again refused. Then God decided that Balaam would go with the princes to Balak, even though he just told him not to do that. So Balaam got on his donkey, but then for some reason God got pissed at him for leaving, even though he was the one who told him to. So God sent his hitman angel in the middle of the road, which freaked the donkey out, because it had bloodlust and was going to kill Balaam. Balaam beat the donkey for acting weird and crushing his foot against the wall, but then the Lord allowed the donkey to talk, and it yelled at Balaam for beating him when it was trying to protect him. Balaam, completely unfazed by this development, wanted to kill the donkey, but the donkey stated how loyal it had been to Balaam, and what is going on right now? God yelled at Balaam for beating his donkey, and Balaam saw the angel of the Lord about to kill him, so Balaam fell on his face and apologized. Then Balaam continued on and arrived at Moab to see Balak at the Lord's command, because I guess God changed his mind again. You know, it's almost as if this entire donkey sequence was completely pointless. Balaam went with Balak to Kirjath Huzoth and told Balak that he could not do what he asked because God wasn't okay with it. So Balak took him to a worshipping site, and he had Balaam sacrifice in it in hopes that he would get a prophecy from the Lord. But Balaam said how he could not curse Israel because God had already blessed them. So Balak got super mad at him and took him to a different worshipping site, and he had Balaam sacrifice in it in hopes that he would get a new prophecy from the Lord. I mean, hey, God just changed his mind 3 times about whether or not he wanted Balaam to meet with Balak. It was worth a try. But Balaam said, again, how he could not curse Israel because God had already blessed them. Oh, and apparently God didn't see any wickedness in Israel, even though, he just punished them with flaming snakes for their wickedness. Balak got super mad at him again, and so he took him to another worshipping site, and he had Balaam sacrifice at it in hopes that he could get a new prophecy from the Lord. But Balaam said for the 3rd time how he could not curse Israel because God had already blessed them. He saw the Israelites from atop the worshipping place, and he remarked how one day they were totally going to destroy their enemies because God was at least as strong as a unicorn. So Balak got super mad at him again because he was no help at all against Israel. Balaam slapped him down and confirmed his faith in the Lord, and gave the prophecy that one day Israel would destroy Moab along with the rest of the civilizations of the land. In the next chapter, Israel was staying in Shittim, and the men were having sex with the women of Moab and were following the gods of Baal. So God got very angry at him. He told Moses to kill all of the men having relations with the Midianites and Moabites, and the women they were having relations with as well. Moses and the leaders of Israel were about to do just that, but special props were given to Phinehas, the priest who was honored by God for stopping his anger with his violence by thrusting a mixed union of an Israelite man and a Midianite woman through their chests, satisfying God's bloodlust. However, 24,000 people had already been killed by the plague sent by God in his wrath before he was pacified by the zealous spear thrusting. God then told Moses to continually harass the Midianites for their sin of seducing the men of Israel. Then God told Moses to take another census of the Israelites, since, he had already killed so many of them that the old one wasn't really accurate anymore. And it takes 44 whole verses to list all the genealogies of each tribe of Israel and their adult male populations. The resulting number was 601,730. Wait a minute, that's almost the exact same number as the last census. What was the point of this? Anyway, then God stated that the inheritance would be given out to the tribes by way of population proportion, but the Levites still do not get any. Hashtag justice for Levites. Also, the genealogy of the Levites is given, as well as all of their families, and there were 23,000 male Levites in all. And apparently quite some time has passed, because the Bible states that all of the Israelites who were numbered in this census were not the same Israelites numbered in the original census at Mount Sinai. And they were the new generation, because all of the old generation had already died in the wilderness, as was prophesied. In the next chapter, the daughters of Zelophehad came to Moses, telling him that their dead father had no sons to give his inheritance to. So Moses brought their case before God. God clarified that if a father had no sons, his inheritance would pass to his daughters, and if he had no children, the inheritance would go to his brothers, and if he had no sibling, it would go to the next closest family member, and so on. Then God told Moses that he would soon die because he didn't hallow him in Zin. I guess Moses really should have done the magic trick right. So Moses asked that a leader be put over Israel to replace him and guide the people. God picked his faithful servant Joshua, and thus he was anointed leader by Eleazar the priest in front of the congregation, and now had authority over them all. Then the Lord once again went over all the times that Israel was supposed to sacrifice for him for 2 chapters in disgusting detail, including daily with 2 lambs, one for each evening and morning, as well as a grain offering for a sweet, sweet aroma and a drink offering. For the Sabbath, lambs and grain for every month, a bunch of livestock, grain, and wine for a sweet aroma. On Passover, a bunch of livestock and grain for a sweet aroma. And for the Feast of Weeks, a bunch of grain, livestock, oil, and wine. And I'm just wondering how the Israelites still have anything to eat when they are sacrificing so much. I mean, for real. Then God told Moses what was to be offered on the Feast of the Trumpets, which was a bunch of livestock, oil, and wine, and grain. And then he went through what was to be offered on the Day of Atonement, which was a bunch of livestock, grain, and wine. Then he went through all 8 days of the Feast of the Tabernacles and what was to be offered on each of them. And as a person who enjoys eating meat, I can confidently say that the sheer volume of animals sacrificed to God by this point has become utterly disgusting. Like, it's so excessive. I can't even... Why are we even still stuck in the wilderness anyway? We've been here for 3 books. Can we stop hearing about animal slaughter over and over again and just get going already? Anyway, Moses told the Israelites all that the Lord had said to him, and then the Lord gave his law concerning vows, and said that men were to keep all that they had promised to do, and stated that men were able to make vows for an arrangement whenever they wanted, but women could only make vows for an arrangement if their husbands/fathers agreed to it. Otherwise, they would have no authority. In the next chapter, the Lord commanded Moses to take vengeance on the Midianites. Moses gathered 1,000 men from each tribe and put their MVP spear thruster, Phinehas, as their leader. And so Israel killed all of the kings and men and burned all of their cities that they dwelled in, but took their women and children alive, as well as the livestock. Moses got mad at them because he wanted them to kill not just the men, but the women and the children too. They're like animals, so slaughter them like animals, as vengeance for how the Midianites seduced some of the men of Israel to worship other gods. Only the virgins were to be spared so that the Israelites could have them for themselves. So, let me get this straight. God was so pissed about Moses goofing up a magic trick that he prevented him from being able to see the promised land. But this was perfectly fine. Yahweh clearly has his priorities in order. After Israel did as Moses commanded, he told every warrior who was made unclean by the bloodshed to clean himself and stay outside of the camp for 7 days. Eleazar the priest then told the Israelites to wash all the booty that they had obtained from the Midianites to cleanse it, and then God told Moses how to divide all of the plunder consisting of tens of thousands of livestock and virgins among the soldiers and the people and the Levites. Even God got in on some of the action, taking some of the livestock and virgin booty for himself. The leaders of the armies were thankful because not a single soldier had died in the battles, so they offered up ornaments of gold to the Lord in the tabernacle. Gad and Reuben had a lot of livestock, though, especially after the recent plunder, and they saw that the land before the Jordan River that was just vacated by Israel was very attractive. So they asked Moses if they could have that land instead of the land over the Jordan River. Moses got super aggressive at them because he thought they would not fight to reclaim the Holy Land for their brethren, and would greatly discourage the Israelites in their efforts. But they assured him that they would still take up arms to deliver Israel its inheritance. Moses seemed okay with that, but low-key threatened that the Lord was going to unleash his wrath upon them if they ever broke their promise. So Gad and Reuben promised to fight with Israel to reclaim the promised land, and then went in and settled the land that was cleared out by the Israelites. Then some of the tribe of Manasseh went to Gilead and dispossessed the Amorites living there, and then Nobah took Kenneth and its villages, just a bit of a conquering side quest. Then Moses wrote down the record of all of the journey from Egypt to the Jordan, and it took up 48 verses, and no, I'm not going to summarize the summary, like for real, I'm dying, you guys, this book is so boring. Then the Lord gave Israel instructions for the conquest of Canaan to Moses in the plains of Moab, and said that when Israel crossed over the Jordan, they had to be prepared to drive out all of the inhabitants and destroy all of their possessions and altars. Israel would inherit the land, but if they did not expel all of the people from the land, they would be a perpetual thorn in their side. Then God told Moses all the official and convoluted boundaries of the land of Canaan that they would possess, which took up 15 verses. Hey, you know what might have been better? A freaking map! Then God appointed a leader of each tribe in order to divide the land up according to their inheritance. Then God told Moses to give the Levites common land in the center of Canaan for them to live and take care of their herds. The Levites were also given 48 whole cities. Hell yeah, hashtag justice for Levites. Of those 48 cities, there had to be 6 cities of refuge in Israel that people could reside in if they ever killed somebody on accident, so that nobody would try to take revenge on them in there. Was that really such a common problem that you need 6 cities full of those people? Anyway, the manslaughterers would stay there to escape the wrath of blood relative avengers, but if a person murdered an Israelite intentionally, then they would be 100% executed by the victim's closest relative, with no exceptions. If the accidental manslayer ever went outside the city, he would have no protection from the avenger of blood until the death of the high priest at the time, after which he would be able to return home. Blood defiles the land, and murderers cannot be redeemed, so they will be executed to satisfy the Lord God. In the final chapter, the chief fathers of Gilead complained that if a man's orphaned daughters with no siblings gained inheritance, then when they married, the inheritance would be transferred to the tribe that their husbands were from. God saw this as a problem, and he told Moses to command that any woman with the inheritance had to marry within their father's own tribe so that the inheritance wouldn't get passed on to another tribe. No inheritance was ever to be passed from one tribe to another, and so the people followed the words of Moses. The end.